Hi, welcome to Eye Openers. I'm your host, Brittany, and each week I bring you insightful conversations with entrepreneurs that will help you make more money, become a strong leader, and build a business culture that you're proud of. Grab your coffee and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Eye Openers. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And also thanks to our guest, Joe, for being here with me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Joe, what we do here is we drink a lot of coffee and we hope that that brings us some new insights into business and leadership and how you're changing the world. So cheers to that.
Yeah, cheers.
I am repping my alma mater today, University of Hawaii, praying that these clouds go away and that it
sure.
But tell me a little bit about what you're drinking. You know, all my guests have their little particular ways they like their coffee or whatever you drink.
Yeah. So for me, it's closer to it's in the afternoon. So I usually switch. If I continue in coffee, I usually switch to a mushroom based coffee, which doesn't taste like mushrooms, but it's the like Four Sigmatic brand stuff because it's a sort of lower caffeine, slower digesting. So that's the afternoon stuff for me.
Mm-hmm. Tell people a little bit about that. I happen to know it because I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan. And when he started talking about it, I definitely bought some. And I'm with you. I never have caffeine after 12 o'clock because I will not be able to sleep. But tell us a little bit about how you make it for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah. So for me, I'm not an expert in or really find any like artistic expression through making coffee. I'll just that I'm a kind of a push button guy. So I just buy honestly the packets that you can then put into boiling water, and you can get different mixtures of it. If it's stress relief you want, then you can get some things with like lion's mane and ashwagandha root, those types of things. So so I bought a few of those and like them for afternoon stuff, and it's pretty straightforward. And I think on Amazon too, they have like K-cups if you have a Keurig machine or whatever. So it's a good choice for those who have a high sensitivity to caffeine, which I'm definitely one of those people. So
yeah, that's awesome. I think you're the first one on here to talk about it. And it's really important because everybody has different preferences or their body responds in a different way. And I'm also not here to be like pushing caffeine all day.
Yeah, no.
Just happens to be something I enjoy. And I know it definitely has an eye-opening effect for me. So
yeah.
And I am too. I'm not super picky. Today I'm a pour over girl, and I do enjoy a little artistic element to it.
Yeah.
But really, I'm approaching it kind of like a science. I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to derive like the best flavors and from which type of beans and from which type of brewing experience. So got my little research project going, and that's kind of why I'm asking everybody else what they do to add to the research.
Another one that I go to for beans is called, I think that's pronounced Kion or Kion, maybe it's Kion. And it's like a branched chain amino acid sort of enhanced like coffee bean thing. But that one usually also, I don't get the jitters and can kind of have a longer lasting sort of energy boost. So that's another good one.
Yeah, awesome. I know when I make mine bulletproof, I avoid the jitters too. It's a totally different coffee experience for me. Cool. Well, that was your coffee intro. Now give us a real intro, give us the highlights of what brought you to this point, being a founder of Scanalytics, and maybe some key, interesting points along the way so that we can dive into where you're at now.
Sure. So academically, I went through a couple different programs and studied sort of a broad range of things from organizational behavior to applied neuroscience, and however briefly. And in between those programs, I spent some time in the military, in the Marines specifically. And so got in a very sort of, brief period of time, got exposure to a lot of different type of, I suppose, organizations and styles and those types of things. So
guests can tell already why I had you on, because I'm a total brain nerd.
Yeah.
And I love organizational behavior. So, and then I'm so excited for everybody to hear about how that ties into the military, because we know, like, as civilians, is that it's revered, right, for the certain organizational components. So go on.
Yeah. So those things, sort of combined, I suppose, to give me I guess what expresses like a unique view on learning new information and building things. And I wanted to apply that to as big of a problem as I could in the civilian world. And to me, what I was sort of always interested in, especially being in different types of environments through the military to school to, everything, is that the sort of idea that our like subconscious, cognitive mechanisms that underpin our human experience of the physical world around us wasn't as deeply explored, certainly when Scanalytics started, and even now, I would say. Meaning, like, a lot of people don't realize that by the time you turn 50, like 45 of those years would be continuously spent inside of a built environment, literally inside of a building. And so it made COVID sort of accelerated I think, understanding of that or appreciation of that, given that a lot of people have spent more time in buildings than maybe even before. So I really wanted to understand, like, how could we improve that world? How could we, understand it better and have it work for us, more effectively? And so that's sort of what started Scanalytics, and it ended up being the figuring out if we were to do that and wanted to approach it by sort of building a ability to do that computationally and scale it, that the floor is sort of this ubiquitous surface that all built spaces have. And we figured, if we could instrument the floor as a sensor, it would sort of preserve privacy. It would be applicable in sort of any physical space. And that would be a, sort of, I guess, noble approach. And so that's sort of how Scanalytics, got its start, and certainly have, learned a lot along the way. So.
Right. And so just for clarity, for listeners' sake, because I already got the chance to talk with you a little bit about it, but you guys are creating sensors to help people better understand, to collect information, to better understand how space is being used, how these buildings are being used, how people move about their space, how much time they spend in certain areas, where do they go from A to B, or do they go from A to F? And, okay.
Yeah.
And tell me maybe just two use cases so people can kind of.
Sure. Yeah. Right. So the sort of underlying technology is, and pursuit is, quantification of physical space. Right. And so one application that we're quite excited to go deeper into, that we've at least started, is in the senior living space, right? Where it's not just, how many people are in a certain zone or what they're, whether or not they're moving, but at that level, and with our sensor granularity, we'll be able to actually, predict fall events or help predict fall events based off of characteristics like the patient's gait deteriorating over time, or, what's happening with what side that they're favoring, or anomalies that might pop up there. So senior living being one. And then the second that we're pretty excited about is, the work that we do with the U.S. Department of Energy, which is around better utilizing or letting buildings better understand precise occupancy so that they can more intelligently control the distribution of and cooling and heating of air in commercial buildings, which is something I learned a lot about entering it, which is that buildings are quite inefficient without that information. So those are two that we're pretty excited about.
Yeah, all you have to do is live in a cold climate in an old house to understand how inefficient some of these systems are. I mean,
right.
We moved down here to California. I was in Rhode Island for 15 years, and we had this beautiful 110-year-old house, and there would be one room that was 80 degrees and the other one is 60 and freezing. And you're like, there's something not right about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Even new buildings sort of have that,
totally. Yeah. Especially,
issue. Right.
Right. Interesting. So, let's talk about your vision, right? Because one reason why I wanted to have you on is you're just awesome, diverse background in different industries with different disciplines. And I'm curious, to hear you speak on what does this look like 3 years from now? So if you and I were to talk and do this again, and I'm like, Joe, so great to speak with you. What would you have accomplished that you'd be excited to tell me about?
Yeah. So I think for us, 3 years from now, the thing that I'd personally be most excited about is, enabling some number of other developers or companies that have built solutions on top of the intelligence that our sensor system is helping create. So I mentioned earlier our ability to quantify physical space, and we think about, of course, a number of applications that we get excited about internally, and we build those applications like senior living energy control. But I personally hope that we only know internally like maybe 10% of the way that same data could be used, and so what I'd be excited about is a growing community of applications that have been built by third parties, where if you can, for example, if we had a huge number, like let's say 10 million or 15 million square feet of school buildings covered, our ability to kind of open that up to the public to say, hey, here's this programming interface that you could build an application on top of this intelligence that's coming from the space. What would you build? And it could be something from a school shooter safety situation, or just security, or occupancy control, whatever it might be. So that's what I hope we're talking about 3 years from now.
Oh, that's amazing. I really hope you are talking about a solution to that 3 years from now. It'd be a big support. One thing I think about is the future of work, right? And so I speak all day long with entrepreneurs who have made the transition now. Some of them were remote before, had components that were, flexible work, but now so many people are getting rid of their workspaces. But there's a huge fear around these missed, like, serendipitous moments that in organizational behavior we call collisions, that were just the run into moments that spark some kind of idea or creativity. And there's so much fear about these things being lost. But really, the kind of data collection you're talking about could really take the mystery out of that we think is just happenstance, or, like I said, serendipity. But you could really start to understand, actually there's a pattern here, and these people tend to walk to this office at this time or whatever, and it might help us recreate this as the future of work changes.
Yeah. Even before the pandemic, we had a couple of customers using it for the purpose of sort of productivity analytics, but basically saying, if you were to take a qualitative survey of employees using a space and ask them things like, how many times do you think you would use this conference room if we built it, or the stand-up desks if we built them? Typically, there's a pretty big disconnect between, a survey like that and the actual use. And so the further sort of understanding, not just how they're using it, but, like, to your point, how can it be designed in more of a real-time fashion to encourage the type of, like you said, collisions that you might want to make to have a more productive work environment. That's of a lot of interest to us. I mean, we're at Scanalytics specifically, we work with, not just bits and bytes, we work with atoms. So so a lot of times we do have to still even physically kind of come back and be there. And there is a lot of, you notice a lot that you miss when you have them after those collisions after a long time. So yeah, I think there is a world in which the ability to quantify those collisions and what the impact that has on, businesses, or lack of, if there's a certain business that doesn't work with, I think is totally worth it.
Mm-hmm. Some of our listeners are saying interesting stuff. So yeah. And if you guys have any ideas for application or apps or whatnot, how this could be used, send them along. Maybe you're having an eye opener right now that can change this. And to build onto that question, with this vision of 3 years from now, what is your greatest opportunity within that? So, what is the thing that you would either want to create as an initiative, or is currently an initiative in your company to get you there? The greatest opportunity.
I think it's externally, it is bridging, like you said, people who might be coming to saying, that they might have their own ideas. Like, it's encouraging that, or provoking that thought, I think, because we haven't had information like this, or at least dense enough or granular enough information like this on how we use space. Although, again, 2/3 of, like, everyone on the planet, spends time inside of physical environments. So I think that's, key and important, is that it's not just going to be introducing a technology, and even if that's, successful, introducing a lot of data on how it's being used. It's also encouraging the thought process that people can start thinking, like asking themselves, how would my life be better today if the spaces that I am entering today even would make my life whatever more productive, more streamlined, whatever it might be. So I think that's a big thing. And internally for us, a lot of scientists and engineers on the team where our accomplishments are typically technical milestones. And so that's both an opportunity and a challenge for us, which is when successful, how can you, help the broader audience think the way that we're thinking?
Tell me more about that.
We have the opportunity to, and the benefit of kind of getting this data, this information in real time, and kind of being at the bleeding edge of where this is going. And I think that's great. At the same time, though, we miss out on, maybe introducing that to the broader audience to say, well, at this point, how would you use it? Which is great because sometimes we do have customers that come to us and say, hey, look, could you build this? We understand that you do this, but could you build this for us? Mm-hmm. And it's not something that we might have thought of, but clearly, drives value for them. So that's a hard thing to do is, especially with something like this, is focus is, again, there are however many different sort of categorically, how many different physical environments there are. Well, that's right. Sort of enumerate. So it's what are the biggest opportunities, the lowest hanging fruit, and then how do you build a way? Because this didn't exist before. So we had to approach it with sort of a zeroth principle thinking, right? Where not even first principle, literally like there was nothing to sort of deconstruct and reassemble. It was sort of assemble something, then deconstruct what you assembled and keep going. So yeah, I think that just sometimes for us, me personally, certainly puts blinders on, like what else are we missing?
Right. Great. So tell me, with your background, what do you feel like are some of those most important skills you got maybe in a roundabout way or like a way you weren't expecting that you use most today?
Yeah. So I think resilience is probably the thing that I've noticed across everything that I've been exposed to is key to, I think getting anywhere, no matter what it is. Like it's just the whole, like, don't give up is very cliche, but like truly it's like just continuing to it's not about, I guess, finding all of the answers, right? It's about finding as many unknowns as possible or finding as many problems with something as possible. And then sort of thinking, well, in the simplest terms, can this still be done if I maybe change the thinking of this or the process of that? So I'm not really like a huge sort of resume reviewer, but what I do like to see is any sort of voluntary introduction of adversity into someone's life. And that could be something as simple as marathon running or, it could be a number of different things. For me, I gave that example because I like endurance athletics, but that to me is something where, someone who does that is sort of voluntarily saying, okay, in my own time, I'll introduce something that is, difficult, that is not something you just pick up. It's not something you can perfect pretty much ever. And so that to me is important. And so we, a lot of people on our team, I've even asked, I know how I can keep going, but I ask other people that, and, we've got a couple, like my co-founder's a particle physics PhD. And that's what he said, right? Is that he's like, well, look, if you can last through, a PhD program, you sort of have an underlying resilience that can transfer to something like this. So, yeah, I think resiliency is a huge thing.
Yeah. And I'm sure that that's something that came up in your maybe neuroscience work, right? I know that there's so much research being done now, trying to uncover this like resilience gene, so to speak, right. Or maybe really in reality, a genetic component to it, because it is such a difference maker for people in their lives. And I use the athletics analogy all the time in my work. I mean, just yesterday at the gym, the experience of doing something with a certain, like for a finite amount of time and having that mental uncomfortability of, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can complete this. And being with yourself physically in your body, like going through that is really groundbreaking. And it is something that I encourage people to do for personal growth all the time. Never mind like the immediate like wonderful impacts of exercise, but really for the mental exercise of experiencing something that's uncomfortable, that feels challenging, that feels uncertain, and you don't know the outcome, and working through it moment by moment and watching how you respond to it and wanting to leave and like wanting to not do it, but pushing through anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Right. It's the sort of post-traumatic growth versus post-traumatic stress, right? The idea that, that you can get stronger from those things if, done right. So, yeah, I completely agree.
So speaking of breakthroughs, let's talk about what kind of breakthroughs you have had over the course of your career, or maybe even in this business that has changed the way that you show up as a leader, or maybe even run your business.
Yeah. So, for me, it's the realization that you can pick up, a series of books on a topic, even if complex, and I think teach yourself enough or learn enough to make moves in places that you might not think you can. Like, I mean, we're at Scanalytics specifically, for a long time, we sort of battled with this idea that we were marrying, two industries that, for the same analogy, like weren't even at the same dance, which is building materials, or even specifically flooring, and like printed electronics or large format electronics, right? And so breakthroughs for us has come from being like, well, we could be on the phone with an expert in one of those fields or the other, and still challenge the way that those things could be used or combined to create something. And so I think it's realizing that it's okay to sort of enter a subject with the sort of baseline naivete, but then be okay with like literally buying, a textbook or whatever, and not thinking like you have to read it cover to cover, but like go through it enough to have conversations and ask, well, is something physically possible? Meaning like, can I introduce something that doesn't, like go against literal, physical laws? And if the answer to that is no, that this doesn't go against one of those laws, like, okay, then it probably can be done. How could it be done? Those types of things. So I think it's that, but bottling that up, and kind of disseminating that across a team is, I think, difficult to do unless the team is practicing that. So I think making sure that teams and individuals on teams can be exposed to problems where they have to do that on their own is important.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what I'm hearing is to not lose that student perspective or mentality, that you guys are always learning, and you need to kind of keep pushing the envelope. But in order to do that, we have to like stay curious and have it, be okay with failing, or be okay with the answer of the physics question really being no, and pivoting, doing something else. Right. But that requires, from my seat, from an organizational perspective, a certain amount of psychological safety. So now, coming from a science background and moving into leadership, I find this is a really, really tough transition for a lot of people to make. Tell me, how do you create that culture where it's okay for people to try things, or maybe be a bit naive, ask those big questions, have something fail? How do you create that psychological safety in the organization?
I think through, demonstration, right? And maybe even an explanation or a reminder of that demonstration. So if I'm doing that personally, I try to say like, hey, I'm certainly the more I learn, the more I just learn that there's so many other things I don't know. But the ability to say, well, I was okay with exploring this, doing this, and here's how I did. So I think it's explaining, if you have some big, breakthrough at the leadership level, I think it's not just, I think positioning it as just, oh, I'm, I'm smart and figured this out is the wrong way. I think it's literally like, oh, hey, like I knew nothing, didn't really know anything about this. This is how I approached it. And sort of success was not like guaranteed in the, set of outcomes of that exercise. Right. So I think it's encouraging it and, showing it, like explaining that, you do it at the leadership level, you do it in whatever position, and, giving some examples to people so that they can identify it when it's an opportunity and do something about it.
Awesome. And how do you guys tell me, what does communication look like, or even I don't want to call it performance management, but really how are your teams staying in touch and staying connected so that those kind of opportunities happen? It's like a conscious effort, I think people forget.
Yeah. Yeah. Admittedly, we're, predominantly asynchronous with communications post pandemic or intra pandemic. But still, I still think there's a sort of big benefit to getting people in the room. It's with some, frequency, some cadence. And even if that's tough to do, I think it's showing up, even if it's asynchronous, it's showing up and making it so that depending upon the composition of the team, right? Like some people are great with Slack and tools like Slack where you're being interrupted, and then other like us, we a lot of us respect each other's heads down time. Like I think we all, at least at Scanalytics, kind of understand that we all probably have, I don't know, 3 to 4 hours of like really good, creative, like time that we can really put towards, right, deep work. And so it's respecting, it's finding the balance between respecting that and not interrupting, and keeping meetings really for what meetings need to be, not, just having them to have them. And then finding the balance. I think we started with a lot more sort of like meetings and check-ins and all those types of things, and then shrunk them as we, if something sort of didn't have the value that it had when it started, we were okay with saying, okay, we can get rid of that. So, I don't think that we've perfected it by any means, but I think we found a sort of happy, medium.
Awesome. And I love that you guys reassess and you see, like, is this meeting, still valuable? Is it doing what we need it to do? And if it's not, being brave enough to get rid of it. I think so many people are stuck in the fear of like, well, what if we, maybe we don't know really what it's doing. And if we remove it, oh my gosh, who knows? But
right.
I am such a huge proponent of the deep work stuff. And we are just trading that in for these interruptions. I understand the value of Slack. I have some guests on here who don't even believe in email, but man, I am not somebody who can deal with the interruptions. And I love that you keep that open to like however people like to work and giving them the autonomy to kind of choose. But yeah, it takes guts to like cancel some of these long-standing meetings that don't serve you guys anymore, and to really just change your mind about something. Adam Grant released a great new book about that we, especially in our culture, are so afraid of changing our mind. And it's wild because it really can hold us back in an organization.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to my next point, which is a huge value that this show brings to our audience, is getting real about some of the darker sides of entrepreneurship. Sure. And because I feel like so many people that I have worked with and met have struggled in isolation when they didn't feel like they could be honest about, what, our business isn't doing great. Like, I could use some help or whatever, because we have to be the face. We got to be the brand ambassador. We got to be our own cheerleader. So there's not always a platform for that. So I want to ask you now, being willing to be vulnerable, what would you say is either yours or your organization's greatest weakness, or something that's holding you guys back from your next level of success?
Yeah. So, definitely personally, it's if I figure something out or feel like I've come to a place where I have a conclusion that satisfies a number of conditions that I've made to move forward. Mentally, I'm moving on from that. But the next step that I might have is to then describe that to, stakeholders or whatever. That could be employees, that could be partners, whatever. And so weakness of mine is expecting that they will also come to the same conclusion using the same evidence that I did to come to that conclusion. And having already been, on the next thing that I want to address, and not appreciating that they might, want to also consider the same evidence and consider whether or not they're going to come to the same conclusion. So I think that's, definitely personally for me. And obviously if it's personal, if it's mine, then there's it's part of the company's DNA, right? Because, being at the leadership level, that's just the reality. So I do think that comes out right in the company too, which is that we might be somewhere and want a partner that we're partnering with that is critical to our, project that we're on or whatever it might be, to be at the same place that we are. And reality is you can't just expect that that's going to be the case. And so that means that, of course, speed of something can be compromised. It could even be, morale compromised because we're, feel like we came to something, then we're waiting and then it's not getting done. And so, yeah, I think it's a combination of those things that, of course, those can be leveraged for good. But I found personally that that's been something where then I also get frustrated. And then the frustration has this constellation of, other symptoms and issues that make it difficult to effectively communicate or, just adds to the problem. So I find that difficult personally and also as an organization.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being willing to share the hard stuff. A lot of people are responding to those, that feedback and saying like, they feel the same way. You have to recognize who's around you and what value they bring. Right. And
it's I learned that, what I love about Scanalytics is the diversity of the disciplines, be it either academic or practice of different engineers, scientists, and other even operational and sales. Is that even if you have a small headcount, but if you have a very diverse suite of people with those disciplines, not understanding that successful communication with one group might be very much not successful communication with another, and so it's tough to feel like you've checked the box for something, right? And then that's tough because if you're an entrepreneur, a pileup of a cognitive or mental pileup of unchecked boxes gets in the way of like deep work, right?
Yeah, completely. What do you do to manage that?
So I have my own little like sheet that I made that sort of corny, call it like the Joe operating system or whatever. And I look at this mental model or this message every day and remind myself that our minds are for having ideas, not holding them. And I tried to use that to remind me like, okay, what are all of my unchecked boxes from the day before? How can I make sure that they don't pile up? And when is it okay to whatever nuke and for lack of a better phrase, like nuke your inbox? And that could be mental inbox, could be checklist, where you're not also then compromising, relationships and all that. So I've been, guilty of that in the past. I'm even recently like having things build up because I'm in my mind, I'm favoring while I'm doing this deep work and this is important for the business, but so is sort of, ongoing, communication and checking boxes. So I try to remind myself of that and then try to, for me, literally sort of make it something I can look at and see how I'm actually performing against it. Which, it's not perfect, but it's improved, I suppose.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. They are loving your quote of having ideas, not holding them. So super powerful. That's a really great, I mean, it's so nice to have just like a quick little like mantra like that to kind of reorient yourself when you can get lost in all the distraction of the shallow work pulling you away from it. So
right.
Cool. This has been so wonderful to speak with you. Really great nuggets, little, eye openers that changed the way that I've definitely seen some things. I love the idea of a Joe's operating system. I even just kind of personalizing it like that. I know you said this is like corny, but I think that it makes it feel like more tied in to you and less arbitrary. I mean, I am guilty of reading thousands of books and wanting to adopt something here or there. Everyone's trying to sell you the next best system. But I think when you really take something and make it yours, it's easier to stay true to it, to stay accountable to it, and making sure it's serving you. So that was really valuable.
Yeah, totally.
Took away. How can people find you?
So personally, probably, LinkedIn's probably the best place, for professionally stuff. I'm on Twitter as well, but I have, sort of, I don't have like a huge following or anything, but I do like to use it as a tool, of course, to do things. So I'm on both of those, but I'd probably say LinkedIn's the best there.
Okay, awesome. I'll make sure that your profile link is in the show notes and that people can reach out if they want to follow up with any of this. So thanks again to all of you guys for joining us, loving your comments, love the conversation. Let's keep it going. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like or feel free to share it on whatever platform you're seeing this on. We try to get shows out to you guys every week so you can learn from other entrepreneurs who are out there really living it and are in the arena doing it. So thank you again, Joe, for being here, for being willing to share, even the not so pretty stuff. It's how we all learn and it's how we all grow. And until next time, thank you guys for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us this week on Eye Openers. Make sure to visit brittanydraws.com/podcast for this week's show notes. And if you found value in today's episode, I would so appreciate you giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts or share it with a friend. Also, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. This all helps to support the show.